So the purpose of this recording is just to explain the requirements for your formative assessment student work analysis assignment, which is the first major project or paper that you have due in this class. All of this information is actually in the content folder in the description of the assignment, but I know sometimes people like to hear it explained a little bit more, so that is the purpose of this video. Basically, what you're going to be doing for this assignment is you are going to be taking some student work, a set of student work samples that is provided to you. You won't be using your own student work. Everybody in the class will have the same set of student work that's provided to them. And you'll actually be sorting that work into performance categories um, that are outlined by a process or a protocol. And then once you have them sorted, you're going to take a look at the performance of the students in the different groupings, and you're going to be writing a paper that is providing your rationale about how you did your sorting, having some misconceptions and errors and some discussions about that, and then making some recommendations for next steps to the teacher. So we're going to go into more detail about each of those sections, but overall, that's what you're going to be doing. So the first thing that you're going to do is not just sit down and jump straight into your paper. You're going to have to do a little preliminary work. You are going to follow the protocol to actually sort the student work samples. So in the content folder, there is a set or a packet of student work samples, and we're all using the same set. And so those work samples are from a third grade math classroom. So you're going to take those student work samples. I think there are about 24, 25 students in the class. And because they are actual student work samples, we're going to protect confidentiality. So they don't have names on them. Instead of names, the students are actually numbered just to protect the confidentiality with that. And then what you're going to do is you are going to take the data analysis procedure for formative assessment, which is a document that's in the folder. You're going to open that up and you're just going to follow the instructions in that process to sort the student work into three categories. And so if you follow the procedures, it's going to explain to you how to do that. But it's not a definitive process. You're going to be making some decisions, and the way that you sort student work might be a little bit different from the way that somebody else sorts it, but you're still going to be close. With that. And so that's okay. Just do the best that you can and make decisions that make the most sense to you. So again, you'll follow the data analysis procedures, follow the instructions in that to sort the student work. And when you're finished, you'll have your student work sorted into three categories. Once you have that done, then you're going to want to take a little bit of time to think through and kind of take a note of who your at-risk students are in the class. Now, I'm going to go ahead and tell you that your at-risk students in this class are pre-identified for you. That doesn't, at risk doesn't mean that they performed poorly. At risk means that they fall into one of the federally identified achievement gap populations. So for example, some students in this class are special education. Some students in this class are free and reduced lunch. Some students in this class are Hispanic. So those are some examples of federally identified students who fall into an identified achievement gap population. We're going to talk a little bit more about at-risk students in an upcoming class, so you'll get more information about that. But for the purposes of this assignment, just understand that there are some students in the class who do meet those at-risk indicators, and they're identified for you based on the numbers. And so it's basically every third student, student 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, and 24 are your students who are at risk. And so you want to take a moment and look at, once you have everything sorted, you want to look at the performance of those students as a group and kind of check and see how they performed in comparison to the class as a whole or in comparison to their peers. Um, because part of what we want to do when we analyze student work is making sure that the instructional practices that we're using are reaching all of our student populations equally, and especially meeting the needs of those at-risk students to accelerate their learning. So that's part of what you're going to be looking at in this assignment. So once you've kind of done through that and thought through that and gotten your groups sorted, then you're ready to start thinking about your paper. So when you write your analysis paper, it's going to be divided into three sections, and I do want to see those headings clearly labeled in your paper. So the first section is called sorting of student work. And again, this is outlined for you in your content folder. But what you're going to be doing is in this section is you're going to be inserting your list or your table of your students that show how you actually sorted them. So I want to see which student you put in which group. And then make sure that you indicate somehow by either putting a star or something like that, which of those students are your at-risk students. So find student 3, put a star by them. Find student 6, put a star by them. Find student 9, put a star by them on your table. That way it's really clear and it becomes really obvious how those students were and how they fell in terms of their performance. And then the main writing piece of this section is going to be you're going to provide a rationale of how you determined which students to put in each category. So how did you determine the differences? And again, this isn't a definitive process necessarily. It's a little bit subjective, but do the best that you can to be thinking through what makes sense and what's logical in terms of how you're sorting the students. And as long as you have a logical rationale for how you sorted the students, then you've done it correctly because it's not really a right or wrong on that. The second section of your paper should be headed misconceptions and errors. And in that section, what you're going to do is you're going to take a look at the students that did not demonstrate full mastery, your got it and your not yet groups. And you're going to take a look because usually what you're going to find is that students make similar mistakes or there are some common mistakes across the different groups. So you want to take a look at the students in each of those areas and talk about the common misconceptions and errors that they had. And then also in this section, this is where you're going to put in your discussion of the performance of the at-risk populations in comparison to the rest of the group. So you will kind of write about those things. There's not necessarily a limit on this paper, but you need to be thorough. So just make sure that, one sentence is not going to cut it. So you're going to talk a little bit more about that. Make sure that you elaborate and have a thorough discussion. All right. The third section of your paper is the final section, and it is next steps. You are going to get into some specific strategies and specific suggestions that you would give to this teacher. So these need to be connected to the misconceptions and errors. So what I would caution you on this is we don't need to give generic feedback to teachers. Don't say things like differentiate instruction or put them in small groups. You need to be a little more specific in terms of the strategies and resources that you recommend to the teacher based on what the misconceptions and errors were. And then you're going to get into next steps specific to the at-risk students, which might be similar to or completely different from the next steps needed for the rest of the class, depending on how they perform. And then again, rationale for how you arrived at those suggestions. If you refer back to your protocol, there's a section in there called questions to ponder, and that might give you some things to think about as well as you're thinking about the next steps. There is a rubric that is provided, so you probably want to check your work against the rubric to make sure you have everything. Just as a reminder, the protocol has a template in it. That template is only to help you think through it. That is not your paper. So your analysis paper needs to be a separate paper, written like a paper, formatted like an APA style paper that you are turning in. Don't just turn in the template. So this is actually an analysis paper. Also, as I mentioned, I want to see the headings for each section of your paper. I want to see specifically in your paper where it says sorting of student work. I want to see a heading specifically misconceptions and errors, and I want to see a specific heading for next steps. Also, just to help you out, the time spent sorting the student work and researching suggestions can count towards your field and clinical experience hours. Remember, you have to have 25 of those for this particular class. So that's it. Those are the kind of the instructions that you need to be able to complete your formative assessment student work analysis assignment. If you have any questions as you get into it, feel free to reach out and either email me or text me or call me.